Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Lab. It's Dr. Contrast live. Just really want to take a moment here and to thank you for those who are going to be tuning in. I want to thank you for obviously that opportunity. And I thought it'd be kind of interesting to go back to just some basics, almost like a square one here. And I think it's interesting that for me anyhow, to go back and review where we started. This program started 4 sessions ago, and I hope it's not one of those situations where it's been stretched out beyond. Hey, Chip, how are you, man? Good to see you. Not in a meeting today, so I should be good. Hey, good deal, Chip. Good to have you on board. I want to go back just very briefly, Chip, with a real quick review here, because I think over the last session, I really started to make some progress on this long-range bomber approach, this Manta LRB-7. And I just really thought, let's go back and look at where we started here. And I think it's interesting for me, and full transparency, I started out with this concept of having this very large bomber, this overscaled, almost B-2 gigantic piece of machinery. And I started doing some sketches. The more I looked at the sketches, they were almost more like fighters. So I thought, something's got to shift here. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that in my lexicon, for example, I'm so used to the transportation design side of product design. This marketplace where it's Star Citizen based or so it's advanced meeting and so forth, and trying to get these circumstances squared away. It's a whole different ball game to play with, a different set of circumstances and aspects to deal with. So it took me about a month or about a session and a half or two to get this rinsed out of my system, to get the scale up, and it kept bothering me from day one about, well, the sketches look interesting, but they're more like fighter types. The scale isn't quite right. Too square, too rectangular. So I started with, let's go back. Just wanted to quickly, I'm going to show you today where we started. And I think you'll be kind of pleasantly surprised as to where we are today. And I'm going to go through just this, I'm going to call this like a refinement day. Not so much sketching, but just get some input from individuals like yourself, Chip, on is this the right direction to look like we've got a good handle on it. And I think the thing I really learned an awful lot from on last Thursday's stream, what I was guilty, I was trying to push too much, for the lack of a better term, character into it, personality. And what was missing was that very simple, sheer, long-range, tactical look that had to have its presence about it. So I think I've kind of arrived at that with some additional detail work that you'll see in a few moments here. So this is where I started 4 sessions ago with this whole concept of having this very enormous bomber situation in, but the proportions were off. So sketch 1 was there. And I went from sketch 1 to sketch 2. Again, how many bombs are we talking about here? I lost count, Chip, after the first 1,000. Just sketch after sketch after sketch. And it just took me a while to rinse that phenomenon of fighter jet out of my head, because that's what you're used to seeing or dealing with. Most of the work I've done in stream work on the Star Citizen has been more, other than the transporter and some of the other, the Manticore and the Starship, the Harvest Star was a little different operation, but this is more of a tactical approach. So here's a second generation of sketches. Again, same basic character, interesting plan views, but they didn't have that bomber character to them. So fast forward to last Thursday, when we finally started to kind of remind, and I'm going to go through some of the sketches, but this is what we started to kind of turn a corner on. I think these sketches began to open up the door for me to begin to say, all right, this is a track we want to take on. And if you're still there, Chip, I really appreciate your input on this this sequence, because all of a sudden, I've always, hey, hi, Brad, how are you, man? Good to see you. Good to have you on board. Hi, Brad. Quick review here. Hope you're doing well. And we're getting, I think we are getting there. I think it's going to be interesting to see what takes place here. So this is phase 2. This goes back about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, where we started with this bomber concept. Then all of a sudden, this last Thursday's stream, it really began to open up the doors. I finally got into the rhythm of, this is a scale we're interested in looking at. And these next sketches kind of helped me propel that just a little bit. So this is one of the studies here. Let's try to get them up in the same. Nope, I guess I'm not going to be able to get that to do that. But this started to look at the difference in some of the character. And again, this is not great sketches, but I think what I'm looking at here was all of a sudden the proportions began to shift. Notice the cockpit size was getting a lot more in line with some sort of a long-range, very large, ominous-looking vehicle. The wingspan was better. There was less truncation in the plan view of the machine. And while I'm at it, it's a really interesting thing that I've discovered over this course of what I've learned in this whole exercise for me, is which have been really healthy, is when you're dealing with rectangular shapes, square shapes, or typical geometric, it makes it positive, huge. And that's what I think that's what it should be, don't you, Chip? Should have a scale about it that's very intimidating. But let me go back to that simple thought. When you go through the sketch process, when you get into formats, for example, like you're working with rectangular form grids or cubistic or square type grids, it's the same thing, two or different design. different design from two different angles, I brought. Yeah, just two. I'm going back to just a bit of a review from last week. All of a sudden, the door started opening up on what this concept began to look like in terms of getting a bomber character down. But I think the key thing I wanted to get across here before I move on is that you work with rectangular shapes or square shapes, that proportion is really manageable to work with. But when you get in a triangular system, especially when you put perspective and the overhead three-quarter front or a rear, everything changes. You've got to really learn how to cheat this thing. And I think that's what I was missing in some of the earlier sketches I was doing, and I'll show you in a few moments here in the review. So this sketch, this family of sketches started opening up the door in terms of there's the first study I did on it. Now a little bit too small, but this one has some character to it. That's got some scale to it that could be interesting to work with. So that was the one we did. Let me get these out of the way. And then the second one was this guy. Let's put them side by side. Notice how all of a sudden I began to really feel much more comfortable if I can get them on the screen side by side. Pretty close, not bad, about right there. How's that? I got pretty close with some of the character we're looking for here in terms of what we started with. And then all of a sudden the next page was this, going into more of like a front hat on and a little bit of a tighter three-quarter front. Made a big difference. Let's get this out of the way here. What I thought was interesting about this, and again, your input very, very helpful, okay? See if you feel the same way I did. I think the more you spread this thing out and get some real expanse in the wings and get those nacelles out there, the more lethal it looked. Maybe that's a bit too much, but again, bring them in tight, looked a lot more fighter system. This is the same kind of a process here, bringing up the fuselage and then coming back down to the wing surface. I think I agree, Chip. I think thank you very much. I think this top one had some real character to it. Like, you know what, that looks like it's got some real meanness to it. So this one was really a good stepping stone to where I'm going to go show you in a few moments here. So all of a sudden, good scale of the cockpit is right. I think, thanks, Chip. That means a lot to me because I think I finally started hitting on all 12 cylinders of what this one wanted to do. So from there, I'm going to keep this sketch in mind. I think I'll put it up front. I'll give it to him. And I went back and did some other, and I thought, no, I'm just trying to force it again. Let's see, bottom one. Let's see, back, but it has a fighter. Yeah, it has. You're right. I think this one had the span of the span of the nacelles, the actual cockpit proportions, and the wing breadth really looked like it was really interesting. So, what do you think, Brett? You still there? It's just it had something about it that said, this is something to build on here. We can kind of let that thing fly, and I think this is the one I sprung off of here. But let's go back to, I think I love the third plan one at the bottom, since it's the bottom side. It's a huge bulge, which clarifies it. Yeah, you're right. It clarifies it's a bomber. So they're in the right category, but this one has some real personality. So enough said. But it was really funny when after it's a bad habit you have, and you start to get something. Oh, let's try something else. Let's kind of let's try to finesse it a little bit more and push it a little further. So I went to this thing, total disaster. I mean, come on, but no, it just lost all of its personality, and you can tell by the character of the sketchers. There's very little soul in these drawings. I thought, you know what, that just doesn't do it. So let me go back to this sheet here for a moment and refer to these guys. And this is the review side of it. So thanks for your patience here, gang. So this is the review side we got taken care of. Then I went from that family of studies to, actually I sprungboard from this sketch right here. Not that, well, let's try the rear three-quarter. And another thing happened that was very, very instrumentally, very transparent lesson for me, was all of a sudden I started looking at this view and I thought, you know what, again, there's something lacking in here. I don't know what at this stage last week, this is what I finished with last Thursday. It didn't have the same personality that this guy had up front here. So I thought, I got to go back and again, truth be told, this in addition to not having the right quite character yet, what I also noticed about it was there's a big vacuum back here. Again, I lost that really big stealth-like big plan form of the wing systems, and I didn't want to lose that. So very interesting thing here. So I started there with some section studies. Then it got worse, for example. When I went into put a little bit of sketch behind it, it didn't look like it was very substantial at all. Yeah, I mean, there's some imposing surface development work here. The pencil sketch wasn't bad, but it just didn't have that same overall, boy, you know what, there's something missing back here. This is kind of forced. The view is kind of odd. I think that's another interesting thing, too. When I'm going through the process here for day after day, the last two, say, Thursdays, view selection is critical. Let's go back to this one. That's why things like that begin to make more sense, because you can look right at it and open it up a little bit, and it changes the format and what you're dealing with. So that was a pencil study. But, from here, I thought, you know what, let's go back and really do some things that are interesting. Let's go back to just good old-fashioned thinking here. Now, these two sketches, all of a sudden brought me back to square one. I mean, this guy here had a lot of connection with this guy here. Let me see if I can get those together here. Put them up there. Nope, not going to fit. But notice how the personality of this thing is a little sleeker, a little simpler. Had a lot more what I refer to as like some bomber grace, if there's such a thing. But again, these sketches were results of, you lost that last sketch you did. For example, this one. It just didn't have the same volume to it. It's a girth, same substance. So I kind of gave up on that, went back to some just basic thinking again, which I thought was very helpful for me to do. And this one really started to look a lot more tailored, I think. The scale wasn't quite there yet, but it had some of the ingredients that I was looking for. Again, the right span on the wings, the right character for some of the undergirth, some of the character up on top. For example, the nacelles looked a little stronger, opened them up a little bit. So I really started to take advantage of that. The pencil shape has that fighter feel. Hard to get the scale to read from the wedge shape. It really is. Yeah, it looks the most futuristic too. You're right. I think you're right, Chip. The pencil shape, this guy here, you mean, this form, hard to get that down because it's really interesting how when you put it all together, it takes it away from really that wedge shape. It's hard to get it across here, but I think I'd start a hit again. Okay, let's go back and research this thing. Start again. Let's get that set. No, the pencil sketch you showed out earlier. This one here, you mean? This one here? Oh no, this guy here. I'm sorry. Yeah, this one. This guy here, this one. That's that one you're referring to? Yeah, I think that's that's the one. I mean, yeah, it didn't have that same. You can't get the wedge shape out of it because it's too much for a fighter. You're right, Chip. So again, great insight on your behalf, guys. Thank you. But all of a sudden, this is starting to have some sing to it. And let me move along here very quickly. So from that generation, I think you'd be very pleasantly surprised. All of a sudden, everything started to click. Now, I'm not there yet, but I really am. I think I'm closing in on some things that are really interesting to work with here. So that, after I went through those series, we're right back to it again. And there we are. What do you think there, guys? That, I think, was a breakthrough. Anybody, in opinion-wise? Look, it had guts to it. I think it had substance to it. It has a lot of this character to it. Let me see if we can put these guys together here, personality-wise. Let's see if we can get those together. Even though the nacelles aren't quite as organic, but I opened them up a little bit, and it really, really interesting how that came together very, very fluidly. So, again, it's constantly in a search here for going back and forth about is it wider, is it narrower, is there more guts to it. In the section detail, I'll show you in a moment here, it really began to open this thing up. I thought this had a lot more character. Notice it reads like a full wedge now. If I look at this in a plan view, it's got some real substance to it. Love the wideness, but I feel it could use more length in order. Yeah, it could be a little longer. That could go that route. But again, the view is interesting, because that's what happens when you get into perspective of triangular shapes. You have to cheat the distortion, for example, from front to back, and then open up the span on this thing to make it look right. If you go too long and too narrow, sometimes this wing surface, for example, in the perspective will really open up. Let me show you what I mean by that. I hate these things. Never use them, other than just making sure that this is abomination. I never use those things. But nonetheless, look at how if you go point to point, look how that perspective drive line is following consistently with it, which it should do. And as you go back, look how it collapses. As you come forward, look how this forward shape here. Oops, let me come back here. Look how this form here just kind of dips ever so slightly. So as you go rearward with this thing, that's what happens. You have to cheat the proportions to make it look right. And I think that was one of the things I was really struggling with in this wedge shape, was trying to make it look right. And every time I tried this view, right or left, that far side wing was just lifting up and almost like it was going airborne or bending. But notice again, look at the span change here. It goes from that to that to that to that. So it's slowly, but from front to back, it slowly but surely drops back to horizon line. So I think we're in pretty good shape there as far as that goes. Interesting. So it's a real lesson in optics in terms of how to cheat this surface to make it look good. Turns toward the vanishing points and it causes, yeah, you got it. It's well said. So this one really, I think, started to really take on some personality. Very interesting. And again, and you'll see in a moment here, I'll show you a front elevation on this thing. It looks nastier. It looks more formidable. It looks like it's in the realm of being a bomber status. And what I'm doing today is I'm getting some feedback from you all, which is really helpful here, guys, because I think if we're happy with this content, I'm gonna start going into some composition pieces here to get some final renderings put together and take this into another series of illustrations. Maybe next, if not Thursday, I'll probably go back to some composition work. Then my next Tuesday, start doing some real finished full color stuff. and to get this up on the website for poster graphics and for sale. So that was a line study. Now then I went back and said, you know what, it's really cool if we put this in tandem with a concept of like a squadron type. So that might be one of the lessons. What I might do is do another sketch in this upper corner here and get a smaller variation. Let me move this over just a bit. A smaller variation of this guy in this back corner. So there's a three-man group going ready for attack mode and so forth. But again, notice really a big change. Really happy with the content in terms of this is where we started here in the review. That told me an awful lot about now it's starting to feel good. This has got some character to it. Now, this is interesting. Now, once that took place, this is really going to be a very, I love the fact that we've got audience participation and chat surfaces back and forth. Really neat. So all of a sudden, I'm working away on this, and as of last, was it yesterday? And last night I get back in my office, and I get this note from Nemo, and Nemo sends us information about, hey, you might want to look at something like this to resolve that cockpit area here, which is kind of interesting here. Notice that's static cockpit up on top, and I'll show you in a moment here the elevation study, what that might look like in pure elevation and a bit of a plan view. That comes up and rises down, but the cockpit's up on top. So, but his comment to me was, and I thought it was interesting, so it might be a lot newer if you just let that surface drop and put the cockpit underneath. So I thought, all right, now I'll give that a try. So let's take a look at what we did here. So from that composition, I went from that to this. And all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but that looked a pretty distinctively newer. So all of a sudden, this is where the canopy, the cockpit is, and all this is all structure up on top. So let me stop right there and get some feedback from you guys. What do you think? Interesting? Yeah, I mean, that made a lot of sense. I mean, all of a sudden, I really appreciated Nemo's insight. Yeah, me too. I think there's a lot fresher looking chip. I think it's a lot newer looking, and you've got that same girth, that math underneath it all. But again, there's just something very melodic about, again, this is typical. And I'm not being critical though. Let's go back to the line study. This is critical. This is typical of where we go here. There's one, and I just redrew it here, but if I can get them both on the screen at the same time, I don't know if I can do that or not. Let's kind of shift this guy and get this into play. A little bit. It's close. Look at the difference in the character between that being typical and that being a little newer. Really interesting. Now that scale, once you get to the read, once you get to read that, this is, yeah, or the at this point, we're past. Yeah. We're past, yeah, we're past, it's a whole different, fresh look to it, I think. Very interesting. So that we are. So I thought that would be kind of neat. I really thought this had a lot of character. I love the fact that this is all cockpit underneath, and we've got obviously a landing gear tucked in behind that in the elevation, and then out on the flanks, the second and third set of landing gear stuff is here. So that to me was really, I thought, very unique. So from there, I'm going to start developing this guy now a little further, get some composition, maybe change the view in the paper, and get a squadron of these guys and do a couple of maybe sketches here on these elevations, and maybe plan views to get this fuselage squared away and see what that might look like. But I really thought that was thank God for Nemo. His insight was terrific. Drop the cockpit underneath and make it look. And again, he brought up the fact that if you look at the manta ray itself, they have that whole open area for water intake, and I think what we're referring to is this cephalic lobes, those big flaps that come out of the side of the opening where they swallow the water. Those cephalic lobes help to direct the water into the shape. I don't know if we can resolve that by adding some of those pieces. Do they need it? I don't know if I want to add that or not. Does it really need that, or to just let it go as is it called to the Manta RB-M7, something of that nature that has a Manta character to it, but it's not quite showing, because those lobes, I had a hard time working with those guys as a product to deal with. It was almost like an interference in simplifying the shapes and then keeping it very simple and clear. So, but let me go back. Once I had that done, I'm going to go back and show you a little review here. This is a neat thing. I went back to this study some time ago, this elevation study. And then again, notice this is what I was referring to. Look at how that whole idea of getting those booms, those cephalic lobes out there, complicated the shape. But I think the thing that I was really intrigued with in this one was the fact that the body form looked like it had some character, and giving it scale really helped. I think that was good too. to get that done grounded. I think the plan view looked a little healthy, a little bit open-ended here, and this plan view that we've just worked on here, this new one, will have a different character. No, it's a lot fuller, so there's less of a gap in there, so it has some real character to it. So I think that really helps enormously. So, but I went back to this just to get an idea of where we were with just the actual shape itself and putting it all together. And again, giving it some girth, some substance, and some human scale. So once I had that down, I went back to this guy and said, you know what, there's a front elevation now. Then look how clean that is. We've got a two-tier intake system, lower and upper. It has that same kind of very stealth, like that almost color, that ribbon that crosses up. And this is where the cockpit is now underneath. And then again, the same wing form. But again, look at the side view of that thing. All of a sudden, it's got some real, it looks like it's, hey, Quantz, how are you? Top secret, yeah, they are top secret. Good to have you on board, Quantz. Just went through a simple review here, and then finally, I think I'm getting down to a point here where we're getting some good resolve on what this guy's going to look like here. So let me put this aside. There's the actual form itself, and again, that whole newness to me, that cockpit area is really strong. A big change of pace. So let me put that aside for a moment here, and then we'll go back and do a couple little variations on the theme here. Let's get this guy lined up here. So if I come back to this, the graphics themselves are starting to look like, if we play this correctly here, what we're looking at is this. We'll have cockpit down here. Just kind of scrub that in just a bit. In the cockpit, in the lower venturi. Intake. As it funnel through and become more aero systems, kind of cooling. And this is the upper piece. And get in the underbelly. Get back in this in just a moment. We'll clean that line up a bit. There she is there. And coming underneath here with this. Again, what do you think of that stance, guys? That makes sense or not? I think it's got some real personality. All of a sudden, the cockpit's down below. You've got enough substance on behind this, a little more girth into this area for captivity. So I'm going to grab a sheet of paper here, and we'll just kind of cover this up so it doesn't smudge on us. But down and through here is elevation. Same system. Cockpit below. Upper intake. Lower intake. Into body form. A little bit of wing weight here. Shadow of the wheel forms. Little escape venturi up here. What do you think of that combination there, guys? Oops, let's do a little bit here. So maybe go to a completely dark upper on this guy. I'll break the shapes up a little bit here. There we are. That shadow in that wheel pant. There we are. There's a front elevation and side elevation rather, and a front elevation. I think that all of a sudden it's starting to take on some real character. I think I'm really pleased with the fact that change of cockpit really has really revolutionized the look of this machine at all. And I think it's really interesting that changed the entire character of getting away from the cockpit being up on top. So let me stop there for a moment and get some input from you guys. Very, very helpful, gentlemen. So feel free. What do you think so far? Are we getting the personality down? Are we closer? Do we think we're getting ready to go to like some final illustration work and the like? It's simple. It's very straightforward. It's not a lot of bells and whistles. It's very elegant as far as I'm concerned. Elegant for a bomber. So I want to keep it simple, but to get the scale right and make sure we're in really good shape here. So let me stop for a moment here. Just going to get your input on these things. What do you think, guys? Well, while I'm waiting on some of the feedback here, I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple little body form studies, like some fuselage sketches here. Kind of get that down to a science. I'm going to get that cockpit area in place. So if it comes down to that, let's just kind of keep this upper hand here for the time being. There it is. If we go back to that, let's just kind of set up something here. Oh, there's a couple little studies here. I mean, I read all of what I saw is it was pretty good and terrific, but I don't think I've seen the design of the bottom part of the jet. So, no, the base of the jet, no, not yet. I think the base side of it, all I think is going to be interesting too. I've read so far so good. It's just really a lot of fun. Just really a lot of fun to kind of see what this thing's going to look like. Now, maybe the scale here might have to be modified a little bit. Maybe have to beat this up a little bit more to get some more girth in that cockpit area. It might come down just a bit more on itself. But again, once you get these individuals in place here, you're looking at something of that nature. Scale-wise, looking through the whole process, maybe the whole wrap, the glass strips up on top. Those things can get resolved yet. And as far as scale goes down here, we're looking at probably something about an area of maybe about right here. So, you know, again, that's a pretty good sized machine here. Maybe this gets a little slimmer too. I think once we get the proportions down, we'll see what that begins to look like. So I thought it was just interesting to put that all together in terms of where we were with, let's get that outside here for a moment. But I think that one is getting a lot closer to the scale we're after. That's a nice tuck-in cockpit sitting underneath. I think the elevation looks pretty solid. I do think that, you know, this is a real inspiration to get that guy. Let's put this all together just to kind of change the character a little bit instead of being so flat. Oop, let me move this up here for just a momento. There it is. Being so flat with it, we've got a pretty good proportion as far as change goes. And the scale looks good here. Maybe a little longer. I think you might be right there too. You said that earlier about getting a little bit length inside the cockpit itself. So let's put those aside for a moment here. Anybody, any commentary so far? Anything coming up? Let's leave this out here for a moment here. Just going to get some feedback from you guys. I really appreciate you guys taking time to tune in today. Really helpful. Very, very helpful. I'm going to go back to this little pencil sketch I had here for a moment. And then I have one, two, yeah. I think let's just for what it's worth, let's see what happens here with surface wise here. We get the same proportion here. Put this out to one side here. And that goes there along with that. And let's see here. We can kind of get just a real quick, real fast study here. Got to determine where we are as far as scale goes. Now this is the old study here, but you know we can kind of modify this just a bit here. Let's put a little bit of tone in this thing here, just for what it's worth. There we are. There. We're going to come in here with a little bit of this. Hey, STEM citizen, how are you? Good to have you. Good to have you on board, gang. Hey, Doc, good to see you and you and the great work you do once again. I can't stay long, but I just wanted to say, hey, thanks for stopping in here. We're just doing a little research study, getting this bomber finished up here, STEM. So looking pretty good here. So what do you think, gang? So far, so good? A wild STEM appeared. Yeah, thank God he's on board here. Neat. Good to have you on board, Doctor. There it is. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to this. And even though, it's not quite it's not the final design, but it's got the same. All we're gonna do is just change the cockpit area here. I think that's gonna make an enormous difference. Let's put a little shadow over here. It's gotta drop this off to one side here so we get that character right. So there we are. There's a little pencil sketch or study about what this guy might look. And yeah, it's looking pretty sweet. I think it's got some real simple surfaces to it. I think overall, what I'm pleased about here, and just for STEM's benefit here, if he's not staying very long here, we went through. This would be the final concept sketch here. I think you notice the difference here, STEM. This guy had the cockpit reared above, and pretty typical. And I got some feedback from one of our viewers from West Germany. He said, "Why don't we put the cockpit underneath?" So I'm going to put that same basic shape all over the nose cone on this thing, but put the cockpit underneath here, and did a little elevation study here just a few moments ago about that. Might look, it's cockpit underneath. It's supposed to be traditionally up on top. Made a big difference. So I think once we get the compositions down for these guys, I think we finally have arrived at what I refer to as a really good, strong bomber study here. Let me just kind of put a little more impact underneath this thing so it's not so scratchy. Just a really good, solid sense of what this guy might be doing. And again, and notice again, what I think is intriguing, if I've lost, there it is. What I think is intriguing about the elevation, everything just kind of dropped very simply right down to the end of the wing cap, and we've got it right from there. So I think we're doing some real justice to this piece now, I think. So I think if you're approving of this, gang, this is, and again, it's just for STEM situation, if you're still with me here, this is what prompted it. These series of sketches started the whole process for some time early on in the stream, STEM. I was saying that they just didn't have the same proportion set for a bomber, like more like fighters and so forth. And everything was kind of struggling for. The scale was not right, the girth wasn't right, the character and personality was missing. So once I got to this series of sketches, I think there's another one here I might show you as well. I might give you a little bit of insight as to where we are or where we were with this thing. Nope, that's not it. If I can find it here, we got it somewhere in here. Yeah, there were a couple of family of forms here. This was one that we did some time ago. And it was a family of shapes, for example, like this guy started last week, and near the end of the day, I put together that pencil sketch. It still looked like a fighter. So I went back to some of the history here, and all of a sudden I went to that page, and this guy here all of a sudden started to have some presence about it. Now notice the knee cells have been moved out quite a bit, but it had the same kind of stance. I was looking, it had scale to it. And again, Chip pointed out earlier, what was strong about this one was the sense of cockpit. It looked like it had some real girth and scale to it. So it was really helpful. So from those two sketches, we moved on, and all of a sudden this one became part of the process. And this is not the final design. This is just a value study. We're going into some other systems here, and maybe this coming Thursday or next week. But again, I think the final composition will look something like this. We're going to put this new design, which is right here. Let me find it out here. The new design will have this character to it. Obviously, again, a canopy underneath, just drop it. It's just a lot newer looking, but I'll give it some sort of a composition that looks like this. We'll put maybe 3 in a row up in the bank system and do a nice finished colored piece. Hopefully I get that all squared away by Thursday. If not, we'll keep developing this and get the line drawing done and get some approval on that and move into some other studies here. So any commentary here in closing here? I'm just about ready to wrap it up. I just want to bring up the speed on where we were, the progress made, for example. I mean, the difference, quite honestly, the difference from that approach, cockpit on top, still looked pretty imposing. But something about this really looked a lot newer. It just had a whole different character to it. It's dropping that, and again, it's much more mantle-like. As I said earlier, too, some of the things what's missing in this concept are those cephalic lobes, and those large fins that come out of the manta ray that collect water. I just didn't get that to work with the shape. It just looked clumsy. And I think it was manifested itself in this sketch here. When you're trying to build it in, it just did not look right. It just added something to it, was just out of character for this form. On the height of the body. You mean this one right here, Chip? Cockpit underneath? I'm just yeah. That, I think that one really made that looks so much newer. Not much wrong with this. I think the overall form was good, but something about that very typical approach it just wasn't new enough. But this little wing glove over the top of that and keeping that shroud intact and the wing structure intact as it moved into the fuselage this is so much fresher. Notice I opened up the diamond on top of this thing and dropped the cockpit underneath. Huge difference. So I'll be working on that guy for hopefully on Thursday, get a good composition set, maybe do a couple of little color roughs before we go to a final piece. But again, guys, those of you tuning in, Abrat Quants, STEM Citizen, and obviously Chip, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join me today, guys. Made a huge difference in getting some real headway down in this bomber study. So I think we're good there. That's the final design. I'm going to put it in composition. What would you like to see? A squadron of 2 or a squadron of 3? Maybe 1 by 1 and then maybe 1 off in the distance. What do you think, gang? Look pretty good? What would you rather see? I don't want to do a solo because that's going to give some context here. Maybe put it up in the atmosphere a little bit and put a squadron together. But I'll take 2. Yeah, that sounds good. 2 of them sounds good. Side by side, much like this one, Chip. Much like that. We've got them side by side. They're one above the other. That's cool. Yeah, I think that's nice. And it gives a lot of airspace back in there for a little bit of color and some brush pastel and the like to get it all put together. So there we are, gang. I think that's really a lot of fun. Cannot thank you again enough for being part of the process today. And I'll be very candid from stream to stream. I really appreciate the input coming from the audience of the individuals who are chatting, because I'm out here trying to just kind of spit on the table and get some ideas down. I definitely want to put the third one. That'd be kind of neat. You're talking about, let's go back to this one, Chip. Let's go back and get this guy with that composition. Maybe one off in the distance, up in this upper corner. Absolutely. I'll make the time to do that. I want to make this thing really count. We've been spending a lot of time on this. I think what I really appreciate the most, I've learned so much from this project in terms of starting out with a character or a vision in mind. It started out more fighter jet, and little by little, week after week, or Tuesday after Thursday, started moving into this bomber realm. And with your input and help, it was phenomenal. And again, I know Captain Nemo can't join us this afternoon, but Nemo in West Germany, if you were tuned in later, I can't thank you enough for the input of this cockpit study. That was just brilliant. He saw it, so why don't you put the cockpit underneath and give it more of a mantle look, like the large opening in the mouth area. And boy, he had it right in the money. Big help input as STEM, Chip, Quants, Ibrat, great input, guys. Thank you so much. Anything in closing, any commentary from any one of you? Ibrat, Slim, and Quants, anybody? Feel free, guys. This is great conversation. I appreciate your help. Super. Hey, Chip, I'm glad you were able to join us the whole session here. Makes a big difference when you have people like yourself on board to kind of guide and take you through the system here. Fun stuff. Cockpit on the bottom would look epic. Yeah, I think that's great. I agree, fully agree. No question whatsoever, gang. So, well, let's wrap this thing up, and I'm gonna go back between now and Thursday, start putting some composition pieces together, show you some line drawing studies. Maybe we'll pick the best of the best and start moving a little bit of color. And I think hopefully by this coming Thursday, I might have a little value study or a little color study to kind of a little rough to work from to get into the final piece. So once again, gang, thank you enough for taking the time to be with me today. Always great to have you on board, and see, it's just so neat. Thank you so much. And if you have a moment, please check out my website at drcontrast.com. Coming soon are some really neat t-shirt apparel work, some of my automotive work like Ferrari, Corvette, Lamborghini, Bentley. There's some things coming to my website for t-shirt graphics you're going to love. I mean, the guy I'm working with has just done a tremendous job. We've got to get them photographed, them up on the site, and we'll have those up for sale real quickly here. And again, drcontrast.com. We've got a really good drawing program. There are 9 lessons. If you know of anybody that's interested in picking that up to take a peek at it, please pass the word along. And above all else, if you know someone who's interested in looking at these stream systems and just basic sketch systems, whether it's lesson planning or illustration work, please let them know I'm available on Tuesday and Thursdays from 2 for about an hour and a half. Really appreciate you noising that abroad, gang. So once again, take care of yourself. Have a great day. And I was close with this because I think it's the most important part of the whole stream. And I mean it sincerely to all of you. And to those of you who come maybe looking in the future, time a little bit later on, always remember to never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. All the best, gang. Thanks so much. And we'll see you Thursday with a whole new set, hopefully, of a great composition and things to work with. Take care. Thank you.